Welcome to this meeting of the Wingecarribee Local Planning Panel on the 3rd of May 2023. I declare the meeting open and it is 2:01 p.m. Wingecarribee Shire Council acknowledges the Gundungurra and the Tharawal people as the traditional custodians of this land we call the Wingecarribee Shire. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders that may be present here today. My name is Stephen Leithley. I'm a town planner and I am the chair of today's panel. I will now move to my left and introduce to you Linda Kelly and get her to just explain her experience.
I'm a town planner with many years' experience in local government and I'm here as an expert member.
And Larissa Ozog.
Thanks. Good afternoon. It's Larissa Ozog. I'm a town planner with local government, state government and private practice experience over 25 years, and I sit on a number of other panels as well. Thanks.
And Chris McCann.
Yes, I'm Chris McCann. I'm a local resident of Burrowang. I'm a lawyer by occupation, but I represent the community as an independent planning person for the purpose of development applications.
Thank you. This meeting is being live streamed to Council's website and the recording will be made available on the website after today's meeting. Just make sure that everyone's got their telephones turned to silent. I left mine on recently at a meeting. It was a bit embarrassing, so just make sure you don't fall into that trap. There are no apologies today. We have a full complement of the panel members. Just in terms of declaration, I'll ask each of the members to just indicate whether they've got any declarations of interest they need to make. Linda?
No, I don't.
No conflicts.
No conflicts of interest.
And I also have no conflicts of interest in relation to the matters today. In terms of the procedures for the meeting, the Council website contains a copy of the operational guidelines for the panel meetings, but I'll be summarising the most important points here. The panel is charged with providing advice on one planning proposal matter today and 4 development applications. We will also hear from registered speakers, members of the public first, followed by representatives of the applicants. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, but that may be extended at my discretion. The panel members may have questions to ask and I may seek a response to any issue raised from the relevant council officer while we're here as well. So once you've made your presentation, if you can just, which I'll ask you to do over here to the left, if you can just stay there and while we see if anyone has any questions of you. When we have heard from all the speakers, the panel will move into a closed session to deliberate and determine the applications. We will then return to announce our advice and that will be live streamed. The minutes of the meeting should be placed on Council website within 2 business days. Okay, so we will now move on to each of the items on the agenda. Item 5.1 we have today comes under the planning proposal heading, although it's not a planning proposal. Council staff have undertaken a review of the low density residential development controls and they have a draft document that they have presented to us in the report for our advice and comment. We have no speakers in relation to that matter today. We then, as I indicated before, we've got 4 development applications. The first development application is DA 2370 and it's a subdivision of land to create 2 lots at 44 Osborne Road, Burradoo. Speaking on behalf of the application is the applicant, Mr. Scott Lee. I'd ask Scott to come forward and speak. While Scott's making his way there, just as another note today, I'll just ask everyone in the gallery to just respect the process, respect people who are speaking, No interjections. You can't ask any questions of people that are speaking today. Your opportunity to speak will be when you come to the front here. Otherwise, that will be it. And I'm not taking questions from the floor. Okay, Scott, you've got 3 minutes to talk on this application.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chair and panel. Thank you for the opportunity. Very briefly, I suppose the way I'd summarise this is that the council report reaches a conclusion that the matter can't be dealt with by the council. It's outside the discretion of council to grant the variation that's required for the subdivision. What I was hoping when we lodged this, and I don't disagree with that conclusion, what we were hoping to get out of the whole of the DA process was perhaps a couple more steps or other recommendations from the council arising from their first position. And what I mean is that the council, what I believe was possible was the council to acknowledge its limitations in its use of clause 4.6, still recognise that the subdivision itself and the variation in this case has some merit and could be supported, and indicate that and provide the opportunity for the Department of Planning or the Secretary General to exercise its greater level of discretion to support the subdivision. Failing that, there's also the possibility of council to recognise the very unique circumstances of the case and indicate that perhaps the applicant or landowner might be, or there might be a different pathway in the lodgement of a planning proposal and using the exceptions clause of the LEP to provide the opportunity for the subdivision, notwithstanding the limitations under the current planning controls. Either of those additional pathways to me and on behalf of my client seem to be to provide a reasonable outcome for the circumstances that exist here. Like I said, I call it unique. Maybe it's not unique. There might be one, maybe up to others across the Shire. But the fact of the matter here is that the council has approved 2 substantial homes in a residential environment, and the existing stopping them subdivide or stopping them having the ability to manage those 2 assets in a reasonable manner are the overriding planning controls. Putting those aside in this particular case, in my way of thinking, doesn't undermine council's strategic plan in any way. It just simply supports the broader objects of the Act, which is to be able to manage land in an economic and productive way, a sensible way. So I never thought that the subdivision would undermine any planning objectives of council. It's not a strategic matter, it's a site-specific matter. We recognise the limitations council faced in dealing with the matter through the limitations of clause 4.6. I was just disappointed at the end that the council report didn't continue then to say this is the alternative ways. I had talked about that with the officer in the past, but it didn't come through in the report. So I'm here simply to request that the panel give consideration to those 2 different ways of dealing with it, because if it ends now, that's not what I would consider to be the most suitable long-term planning outcome. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Scott. So my understanding is, from what you've just said, that you acknowledge that the council, under clause 4.66, hasn't got the capacity to approve the application.
Yeah, correct. I'm not arguing with that.
So, and that you were seeking some kind of support for an alternative pathway. I'm surprised that you went down the DA path when you knew that it couldn't be approved, and not put in a planning proposal as a way of gaining council support.
Yeah, great. Very legitimate question. I suppose I understood, and certainly stand to be corrected, I had some discussions, I haven't sought legal advice, but my understanding has always been that the function of clause 4.6 gives council certain opportunity to vary things. It's not necessarily the end of the planning process, and the department, through the secretary, retains some greater level of discretion, and it is possible for the council to acknowledge its own limitations but indicate support on the principle of the matter and request that the department exercise that greater level of discretion. That's why, and the DA process still remains the best process to have all those issues ventilated and discussed. And that's, I believe that. What's happened here is that the council has assessed the application. It's rightfully pointed out the limitations, its own limitations in dealing with it, but it hasn't gone into the next stage and talked about the other ways that the matter could be finally resolved. Like I said, stopping now doesn't do anybody any good, certainly not my client, but it's not a proper response from the planning process. It just says, oh, we can't deal with it. Well, someone else can, and there are other options available to go the long way round, and they should have been part of the assessment report, in my opinion. So the DA, what I could have done, and there was lodge a concurrent DA planning proposal. But then again, from the applicant's point of view, before you lodge a planning proposal, we all know what's involved in that. Getting some indication of the council's position is important. Otherwise, there's a lot of time and money spent to get nowhere, potentially. Whereas this DA, in our mind, was a good, simple way to put an issue on the table for discussion, assessment, and determination with options. My disappointment is that the report's only done part of that, and that's why I'm here asking the panel to perhaps look at what could be done, and if within your powers, make a recommendation that that you think that the subdivision itself is reasonable. It's not, the variation could be seen as reasonable, and the Department of Planning can have a look at it and issue under their greater level of delegation or discretion, issue an approval. And if all of that is not possible, there is the possibility of a planning proposal. But why would I tell my client to go down the path of a planning proposal when we have a forum here that can indicate whether or not that's likely to be successful or not, and I can't get an answer on that. It's fraught with problems, and I think that if nothing else, the DA has provided a forum for a proper consideration of that, and I'm just simply asking the panel in its deliberations and determination to give some guidance that is useful to the applicant, and then the applicant can do what they think is the next thing to do. That's all.
No.
So Scott, I'm going to respond to you. Okay, you're a planner with considerable experience. Clause 4.66. Go away and have a look at that clause after this meeting today. It's a jurisdictional prerequisite. So forget the Department of Planning. This application can't even get referred to the Department of Planning because this application doesn't get past clause 4.66, which applies to the land that's subject to this. It's proposing to create 2 lots that are less than the minimum lot size, and at least one of them is less than 90% of the development standard. So this development application could never get approved. So the process, if you want some advice as to if I need to give you, or this panel needs to give you advice on what to do, the process would be to go and speak to Mr. Park and the strategic planning section about making a broad change to the actual 6.6 actually comes out of the standard LEP. So it's something that, we're all familiar with. We work across the state. That's not something that's unfamiliar with us. So the proper process would be to talk to Mr. Park about whether there's merit, a strategic merit, because I don't know whether there'd be merit on a site-specific basis, but whether there'd be strategic merit to look at that provision in the LEP in some sort of future review of the LEP. I take it that there's 2 large houses on the site. I can see your point, but I'm just surprised. I'm very surprised that someone of your experience has lodged this development application and gone through this process instead of going through a strategic planning process. As I said, that's not a question. That's more a response to you wanting some direction. I've given it to you. We've got no other questions. Thank you very much for your time. The second item we've got today, item 6.2, is DA 18/27.05. It's a modification application. It relates to additions to the existing building to contain an education room and kitchenette as part of a community facility at Southern Highlands Botanical Gardens at 1 Old South Road, Bowral. We have no one speaking in relation to that matter today. We also have another modification application in relation to a shed, a DA for a shed at Southern Highlands Botanical Gardens. The DA number there, item 6.3, is 21/1048.01, and speaking against the application is Alan Recce. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lee. He's going to speak on your behalf. Okay, that's why I was wondering why you were still sitting there, Scott. So you go for it.
Thank you. Yeah, Alan and Sonia, who are property owners adjacent to the Botanic Gardens, just have asked me to make a couple of points in relation to what is occurring there at the Botanic Gardens. Their interest doesn't. Their interest is in the gardens generally, but more particularly. The proposed toilet block that the council has, or the gardens are planning on constructing, which directly affects their property. The toilet block is not part of either of the development applications before the panel, so I'm unsure as to what the panel's role might be.
I'll give you some leeway, Scott, but because we're dealing with applications here, specific applications here. So
that's right, and I've just simply been asked by the Recces to take the possible opportunity to raise the matter, because the toilet block, unlike every other aspect of the Botanic Gardens, is not being dealt with by a development application where these matters, all these other matters are. The point simply to be made on their behalf is that perhaps that is odd, and that perhaps that should be dealt with by a development application to provide the appropriate forum for proper consideration of all the issues, as distinct from the alternative process council is doing, which to date has not provided the opportunity for proper consideration of the issues and involvement of the landowners that may be affected. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, well, all I can say is there are council staff here that have noted it. They'll investigate that. It's probably best to talk to council staff regarding that matter, and they can investigate and let you know what's happening with it. Okay.
Can I just make a comment on that? It could, and I don't know, but it could fall under the Transport and Infrastructure set. So there are provisions for council and government-owned properties to do certain amenity works, very more basic ones that don't need consent. So as exempt development. Okay. So it potentially could fall within that category. So council offices, for example, admin offices, things like that, there are some scope to do certain works. Same with public amenity buildings. Often down at the beach, you'll find a lot of amenities. I know in eastern suburbs, a lot of those works are not DA works, they're exempt works. So that could be covered, but I'll leave that to council to confirm and obviously provide you with more details.
Speak to the council staff, after the meeting. Yep. Okay, so our next item is item 6.4, DA 22/1064, construction of a childcare centre at 9 to 11 Oxley Hill Road, Bowral. We have 3 speakers today speaking in relation to this matter. Speaking against the application is Tony Amanerio. Hopefully I've pronounced that right. And you also have, Tony, you have some video that you wish to show, which we're happy for you to provide council if you haven't already provided it. Come up and speak to my left, thank you. Can you also just explain where you live to, Tony, so we know where you are in relation to this site? We did go out there today. We have looked at the site. as we did with all sites today, so we are familiar with it.
Can I just get the video roll? If you just put it on a loop, I think there's a mix of
Where do we see it
Video
from, Lisa,
and-
behind us?
photos.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, if you just hit play and I'll just talk over the top of it. My name's Tony Amaniro. Myself and my partner Maxine Green live at 1 Kiama Street, Bowral, also known as 7 Oxleys Hill Road. We live next door to the property in question in this DA. Maxine Green is the property owner at 1 Kiama Street, Bowral. The photos and video clips you're seeing show the site and surrounds in question under floodwater on Monday, March the 7th, 2022. There was a second flood event with similar flooding levels on Sunday the 5th of June 2016, with levels peaking during the night. I wasn't able to photograph or video this flooding for obvious reasons. Both times surrounding roads were closed by authorities, including Oxleys Hill Road and Kirkham Road, Bowral. Both times access in and out of this area was blocked. The normally placid Mittagong Creek, which adjoins the property, becomes a raging torrent some 20 to 30 metres wide. As the floodwaters rise, they spill over to cover the surrounding roads. The existing building on the site, currently rented by Dadaree Disability Services, was flooded during this March 7 flood event, with floodwaters saturating all floor coverings. On the morning of March the 7th, the staff were evacuated, sandbagging put in place, but the building still flooded. You can see some of those photos there. The DA uses a flood report which does not take into account the level and frequency of these flood events, specifically the Bowral Floodplain Risk Management Study, brackets Boucher Consulting 2009, a study which is now 14 years out of date with today's climate and flooding scenarios. In a phone conversation last year between myself and the Planning Development Officer from Wingecarribee Council, the March 7th event was referred to by the officer as a 1 in 100 year flood. However, 2 major flood events have occurred within a 10-year time frame. These images show that putting a childcare centre on this site is totally inappropriate and downright dangerous. Traffic. Another issue is the heavy truck movements from the concrete batching plant owned by Wholesome, directly opposite the DA site. Delivery of blue metal, sand and cement supplies means large 30-tonne trucks often have to negotiate 3 and 4-point turns to manoeuvre their way into the entry driveway directly opposite the DA site. Add to this the concrete mixer trucks entering and leaving the site on a regular basis from 6 a.m. until closing time Monday to Saturday. This poses an unacceptable traffic mix for parents dropping off and picking up young children from the proposed centre. As neighbours, we also feel the eastern elevated walkway and play area of the proposed building, which falls on our boundary, impacts unacceptably on our property. The removal of trees... Yeah, okay. There's an unacceptable amount of removal of trees, some of which are on impact on our boundary as well. The flooding issues and industrial nature of this area should exclude the site as a potential childcare centre. We agree with Council's determination to refuse the development application. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Reiki. Questions? No questions? Any questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm, are you a beautiful heritage-looking home that's
Yeah, the
next?
two-storey house next door.
Yeah, the house. Okay, yeah. I just didn't know where you were. Thank you. Thanks. Sorry, is that a heritage item? Just out of curiosity, are you listed or anything?
Well,
You're not sure.
it's not listed, but we think it should be.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, Alan. And so this first video was from the 7th of March, correct? Then there was the June
I
flooding?
couldn't film the June event in 2016 because it peaked during the night, and yeah, there wasn't going to be much point trying to get out there and film it. But the flooding was at similar levels with road closures of Oxleys Hill Road and Kirkham Road. What tends to happen is Mittagong Creek, as the level rises, it just finds the easiest point for the water to flood away, and that usually means, as well as the creek, it comes up, finds its way onto the road, all the drains get blocked up, and then the levels rise on both roads.
I think in 2021 there were 3 separate occurrences, weren't there?
Possibly. I didn't have those recorded with me, but the 2 really big ones were 16 and 20 last year, March of last year.
Yes.
I have thought of a question I'd like to ask. How long did the 2022 flooding event that you videoed take to recede?
To recede? Quite a while. We were locked. I struggled to get back to where the house was. I had to get through flood water and basically do it on foot and leave my car over on the other side of the railway line. It was probably later that night or early the next morning that I was allowed to go back and get my car and drive back home. Yeah. Basically, we were locked out thanks to the floodwaters.
And how much time did you were you aware that those local roads were being cut?
None. I even looked on Google Maps and it told me that I could get home, but when I got onto Parade Station Street, I could see that the police were turning everyone around on that afternoon, and I had no warning. Dattery, who were next door, were advised to evacuate because they were told that it might potentially get worse, which was a good thing because it did get worse, and they would have been stuck there all night with a flooded building. Yeah.
Okay. Just one other question: how long have you been living on the site for?
My partner's been there since 23 years. Yeah.
And how often has that flooded, say, in the last 10 years? Not just necessarily the site, but just you've had difficulty getting in and out of your property and getting access to your property during flood events? 4 or 5 times, okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Reiki. You can resume your seat in the gallery. Okay, speaking as the applicant, Theodore Onisfero. And your daughter is also down. You're going to speak at the same time, and that's Stephanie. You can hand some material up. Is this the material that was sent through to council? So this is additional material to the other material that you've...
In regard to this, I apologise, but we had 9 hours between notification of council's reports and the time we closed it for us to submit.
Right, right.
And so we quickly threw something together. We obviously looked at it further as we had more time, and so we did that in preparation for today.
It's a lot of information at the last minute, that's all I'll say, but I appreciate the constraints you're working under. You've seen the report, you've read the report. It's recommended, the application's recommended for refusal. You're speaking today, what are you seeking from the panel before you start your presentation?
I'm hoping that the panel will ask that there be no decision made until I have an opportunity to meet with council to discuss the contents of the report. I believe the content of the report is very helpful to understanding what I need to address.
Okay, just briefly, that's fine. So I'll start your presentation now, thank you.
Even 4 minutes is going to rush it. Suffice to say, the video that you've just seen is helpful, I agree. We've had the building that we're proposing to build is 1.63 metres above the building that was there. And the ingress of water into that existing building was a matter of inches. Excuse me, I'm old. only a matter of inches. Consequently, and we are, the building is designed for people not to leave if need be. But in fact, that's not the application. The application is in fact to say, unlike the previous speaker, he lives there. And he said, you may have heard him say that the peak was in the middle of the night. And we are under the same development controls as the residents. But the advantage we have is we don't live here. And that if there's a problem overnight, it's no risk. In other words, the risky time for people here, if there is any, and we say there isn't, is for the 8 hours of a day, of the light part of a day. The majority of injuries and whatever problems associated with it is overnight. But this is a business that only will operate during daylight hours. Irrespective of that, we're saying that we're not silly. And if you sit down and say, analyse the risk, and I think you made a very good point, which is how long it takes to recede, but more importantly, how long it takes to get to a dangerous level. One of my favourite songs is Jose Feliciano, Listen to the Pouring Rain. Listen to the pouring rain, listen to it pour. The reality is, this is not like a fire that can start 1 minute and keep going and then all of a sudden engulf you. For this to happen, it has to rain, and it has to rain for a long time. I've lived here for 33 years, and I know when we're going to have a problem. I'm a grazier. I run 400 cattle here. I know when we're going to have a problem in the creeks because it's rained for 5 days. And when you work back from the dates that he's nominated, and by the way, they were all 1 in 100 year events, and in my case, every one of them, my building would have been at least 1 metre above the water line, irrespective of what the studies say. And that's based on the advantage we have of the building next door and the useful video we saw a moment ago. I'm not addressing, by the way, any other topic because when you read it all, there's only one topic, and that's flooding. With regard to the privacy issue, with regard to the walkway, we can move it over away from the witness's boundary, etc. So there's only one real issue only, which is the plan of management, where we say, we're just not going to open. We're not silly. These are 1 in 100 year events. The plans that you've been given do not turn around and address the fact that there is so much demand for these childcare centres. And this is a necessity infrastructure, not a discretionary infrastructure. This is needed. And good town planning often requires a little bit of compromise. And we're saying, look, we've put it above or at the maximum flood level, but we're saying we intend to run this where we're not even going to be relying on the SES.
Can I just hold you there for 1 second?
Thank you.
I've got 2 speakers today, so is Stephanie going to speak as well?
Can I have 1 minute of hers?
Are you going to speak? Are you going to speak, Stephanie? Don't speak for her. You can't.
I'm happy to give my minutes to my dad.
All 3?
Yes.
Oh my
Okay,
God,
right.
that's lovely.
So that'll give you another
Thank
3
you.
minutes.
Thank you. And thank you. I've lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Yes, we're not relying. Thank you. We're not relying on the SES. We're relying on a plan of management which says if you've had X amount of rain, we're going to go. The reality is the plan. By the way, what's really offensive to me, and I've been a lawyer for many years, is that the hydrology report in this is unnamed, undated, and it's a summary. If you look at the minutes, we don't know who prepared it. We don't actually know what questions were asked of that expert on behalf of the council. We haven't seen the report at all. All we've seen is extracts from it. Although he seems to suggest modelling needs to be done, and I support it. I'm happy to do the modelling. Because at the end of the day, the things you've got to take into consideration are how long in this particular catchment, no 2 floods are alike, and no 2 locations are alike. How long does it take for this catchment to be in any way in jeopardy? And that's modelling that you can do and say, right, these are the proposed conditions of approval that we would want to allow you to do a childcare centre there, and I would either say yes or no. If I say no, then ultimately there's no childcare centre. I'm delighted to hear that you went there today, by the way, because yes, it's in an industrial area, but that view to the north, which is where the children will be playing, is very beautiful. You're looking up Oxley Hill, you've got a tree nursery next door, how beautiful is that? And you're looking up the hill. In many ways, the amenity here is great. This will be the closest childcare centre to the CBD of Bowral, and there are many advantages there. Did you notice that there's a pedestrian crossing at the end of the street to Harris Farm Markets there? Correct. I'm the developer of Harris Farm Markets. It's 15 years old. I've never had a flood problem there. There has been, meaning damage, flood damage, I apologise. We've had floods there where our customers have had it difficult to go, but it's easy to develop a building that you know there'll be no flood damage. And if we've got the advantage that we've got a peg in the ground, which is the existing building, and you say, right, what's happened to this building? Weirdly, I've owned this for 3 years, and there's been 3 floods in 3 years, each one in 100-year floods. But at the end of the day, we know that there's going to be no need to evacuate if the unknown occurs. But more importantly, we don't even intend to open. Also, we've nominated another school, which happens to be in Industrial Loan, only 80 metres up the road, which is a performing arts centre, as our evacuation point. We see that, yes, I understand the problems with floods, but I'm saying you can negotiate around it. And it's not fair to turn around and say, here's some extracts from a report, which I don't know, haven't seen, don't understand it, don't know who prepared it, but let's model this at my expense, because it's my expert report. Let's model this and show that there is absolutely no need to rely on SES, warnings, etc. If it rains, you know when it's going to flood here. How perfect.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, please read what I've sent you, because there's so much meat on the bone here, and I appreciate, if possible...
And I appreciate you'll have put effort into it. Stephanie, I'm going to give you a minute. Have you got a minute you'd like to say anything?
So you're an architect.
Well, I studied architecture at Sydney Uni, so I have worked with my dad and sort of helped where I can
And
with
that
this sort of development.
Refer to that.
We amended the plan.
They've got it, they've got it.
Have they got this?
Yes.
We'll see. We've amended the plan.
I've got a daughter, Mr. Renke. I'd be very careful trying to tell her what to do.
I just directed me to it. Where we amended the plan and moved the ramp over, which was against our neighbour's boundary, and we added some tree screening, planting, which would be a height which then they wouldn't. Obviously, that helps block noise, blocks the view, and again, is more greenery for the children to be looking at. Also, within the plan, when we went to the site, I think a key point to mention is the disability services is our tenant. There was no extreme flooding to that building like our neighbour has mentioned. We had to get the carpet steam clean. We didn't have to replace anything. We didn't have to even rip up the carpet. It needed to be steam clean because there was a small amount of water. Sorry, but that was the extent of it. Also, when we look at issues such as the SAS, there was even something on the TV last night which highlighted the issues of that program. We've designed as much as we can around it to highlight that that's not something that we need to rely upon. Obviously, the government is going to implement more things for text messages, which would then help even further. However, that's something that we're not having to worry about because we've overcome it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Questions from panel members? I'll start this end. Chris, with you.
No questions at this point.
Larissa, any questions? Any questions? I have some questions. Council staff have advised us that you did not attend a pre-DA lodgement meeting. Is that correct?
I don't think that's right. But by the way, I have 5 current developments here at the moment.
Well, I'm going to take it on value that the council staff have said that you didn't, and because an RFI was sent to you with an extensive list of information required to be addressed as part of the application.
Oh, right, excuse me. I can now answer that. You've reminded me. May I?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. We lodged the DA. We then had a meeting about the DA, and there was an extensive list of information required given to us at that meeting, and then we answered it. So I don't think that's I don't know if it's a pre-DA or a whatever.
Okay, so good. Just to note for future,
Yes.
This is you obviously know you've got a difficult sort of site here with the flooding, so you're fully aware of that following your presentation. So you should be really, with sites like this and proposals like this, no matter where you are across the state, this great state of New South Wales, having a pre-DA lodgement meeting with the council. Strongly recommended, okay, because one of the things we're all wanting to do is you've asked us to essentially defer the application to give you more time to deal with the issues. When was the application lodged?
18 months ago.
Okay, so it's been in the system now for 18 months. Yeah, I'm not going to have much...
My answer to that is that the extracts of the hydrology report that I saw refer to the it didn't contain any modelling, it just recommended modelling.
Yep.
From my point of view, if modelling, I'm content to ask to defer to do the modelling, because clearly only when I've read this report did I understand fully the concerns of the independent planner that's been appointed to the
Right.
job.
And this, and you need to respect also this panel may have other issues with the proposal
I
beyond that.
accept that, but hopefully once you've
Yeah.
read the information, you will see that the realistic is that this is the issue.
So the next question
Yes.
I'd have to you, it doesn't appear that you had engaged the services of a town planning consultant to assist you preparing this application. When you lodged the DA, prior to lodging the DA, you may have engaged with someone subsequent to that process, but not prior to lodging it.
He's here, may I ask him? Scott,
No,
I don't
no, no.
remember, do you?
No. No, up front, before it was lodged. No, there we go. Yep. So that's, and again, engaging with a planning consultant early in the process prior to lodging the application, especially on a site like this where you've got some issues, reduces that length of time in terms of DA determination as well. So, noting that
I hear you.
that didn't occur as well. Okay, I have no other questions. Thank you very much
Thank you.
for your presentation. As previously indicated, we will now move into a closed session to deliberate and return to the public meeting to announce our decisions, which I will do in summary form, not in detail form. That will be live streamed, and the minutes with the detailed reasons for our decisions will be placed on Council's website within 2 business days. Thank you very much. Close the meeting at 2:42 p.m.